Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chapters on Armstrong Television. Today, our guest is Tony Viola, Anthony J. Viola, the proper name, a professor of English at Marshall University, where he teaches literature and creative writing. I'm Carter Seaton, your host, and we're delighted to be talking about All Lies Begin with Truth. Tony received his PhD in creative writing at Ohio University and has taught at the University of Kentucky. One story was listed in 100 Other Distinguished Stories, Best American Short Stories, and another received a Pushcart Prize nomination. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Welcome to Chapters. It's wonderful to have you here, and I can't wait to talk about your book. First, tell me the significance of that title. It's an intriguing concept to think about in any broad concept, but tell us what it means in this book.
What it means in this book, it pertains to one of the three main characters. There are three characters who all have a section that's devoted to their perspective. And Cass Still Taylor, she's in her early 40s. She grew up in the small town. It's a fictional town which the novel is based in. And she's able to pick up on sort of the vibes of all the townspeople as they're attempting to sort of live, I guess, a truthful, honest life, but then somehow that gets spiraled off course. So in her section, I think in her first section, she talks about that a little bit, and then at the very end of the book, that comes up again, that, she's sort of reached an epiphany that from now on in her life, she'll no longer lead a life of lies, but embrace the truth, because the idea is that we all start off with this truth, and then we somehow, as we mature and we adapt to societal demands and cultural pressure, we lose sight of that truth, and we venture off into what's more of a lie.
You say that the 3 points of view have sections, but they're really interwoven in a lot of places. Is that correct?
Yeah. So there are times when
you have three main characters: Eris, Boone, and Cass.
Yes.
Okay.
I think in the first Cass section, we see Eris and we also see Boone. And then I think, and as the novel continues, even though one scene isn't one, even though one section is from one particular character's perspective, we do see the other characters interacting. So there is overlap. Quite throughout, yes.
Right. All right. So that concept really doesn't have that much to do with the issue at hand in the book, which is in the environmental and controversial practice of fracking.
Yes.
Explain to people, if they don't know what fracking means, explain what that is.
Sure. Fracking is short for hydraulic fracturing. And for years, I guess engineers have discovered or located large pockets of natural gas that they could not access because above those pockets of natural gas were large shale basins. So it wasn't until recently, I mean recently, probably like over 20 years now, where they figured out a way to penetrate the shale basin to get to that pocket of natural gas. So since these reserves they're untapped, they haven't been touched, there's a lot there. So the profit margin is huge, because once they actually penetrate the shale basin, then they can get all that natural gas. So essentially what they do is they drill, and as they continue to drill, they just add lines of pipe down.
Horizontally.
Yes, and it's horizontal drilling, which, if you read the novel, creates a lot of legal issues, or I should say, it prevents people from doing anything about it, because the laws don't really cover horizontal drilling, they cover vertical drilling. So then what happens is once they reach what they feel is the natural pocket or the shale basin, I should say, they force water and usually sand, but it could be something similar to sand, and a bunch of chemicals. And they claim that the chemicals are only a certain percentage, but there's, hundreds of thousands of gallons of water being pumped in there, so that percentage becomes really large. And sometimes on site, they don't even know what chemicals they're putting in, and they hide behind trade secret laws in most states. So in other words, if someone has a bread recipe you work in a restaurant and you leave, they could make you sign something that says you could not reveal.
Non-disclosure.
Not exactly. So a lot of states don't make companies report what they put in. And there's also another thing too, is if you claim that there's no diesel fuel in your fracking fluid, it makes you immune as well, and that's called the Halliburton loophole.
We know that company.
Yeah,
right.
and we know where that came from. It was something that Dick Cheney had
Yeah.
managed to slip in.
How did you get interested in this subject?
I was teaching. It was fall of 2014. I was teaching a contemporary literature class for the very first time at Marshall, and I had to come up with the books I was going to teach. So I decided to do two things. Since it was contemporary literature, I'm open to more than just fiction. So I wanted to have 2 examples of fiction, 2 examples of poetry, 2 examples of creative nonfiction, and then when I started thinking about the titles, I realized in addition to that, I was focusing on location. So I focused on the Midwest, and I also focused on the Appalachian region. And I remember this book by Eric Reese. It was called Lost Mountain. I think he surveys strip mining going on in Kentucky that takes place for over a year, and he does investigative journalism. And when I reread that, I was considering that book. When I reread that, I knew 2 things. I knew, first of all, that I'm going to assign that book, and secondly, that he was a brave man for doing what he did. I mean, he risked his life and his family's well-being just to report on what was going on. So, and once I moved here in 2006, I was living in Lexington, Kentucky in 2004. So clearly, that's where I met Eric Reese. Clearly, strip mining became something that I was, implanted in me. I didn't really know too much about it. And then when I moved here with all the history of that going on, it became more and more prominent. So I just said, I also learned something else when I taught that course, is that a lot of contemporary literature is political. So I wasn't really writing things that were that political. So I thought, well, let me try and write this short story about fracking, about strip mining going on. And then once I started researching, I was like, well, they're actually switching to hydraulic fracturing. It's like, and this was 2014. It was about 2015 when I started the idea of the story. And I said, well, I'm a little behind the times, so I better educate myself.
The strip mining had stopped, and now
Yes.
they were doing mountaintop removal mining, which
Yes.
is a different thing.
Yes. Actually, I think, I should correct myself. I think it was Mountaintop removal that Eric Reese's book was about.
Okay.
But then I started, seeing articles and, headlines about fracking. And I said, well, what's this all about? So then I looked into it, and then all of a sudden I thought, well, this is
what you want to do.
Yeah, this is I think, because it's cutting edge. It's happening right now, and not many people know about it. I didn't know anything about it at the time.
Did you start writing the book while you were in Kentucky, or after you moved to West Virginia?
West Virginia. This course, I think, because whenever you have to teach material, this is what I found as an educator. You have to, I wouldn't say master it, but you have to study it very well, because you have to ask the questions, anticipate what the conversation is going to be like. So I really immersed myself in that book. And like I said, it was the following semester, spring of 2015, I started writing a short story. And after about a month, I saw the story not start to close down, but open up. And I said, I've got to do one of 2 things. I've got to shut this down and make this a short story, or I'm going to make this something larger. And then it blossomed.
Okay.
So.
All right, so you've talked about the 3 characters. So tell us a little bit about the plot. We know now what the issue is, and we know who the characters are. So how do they get involved with this issue of somebody coming into their town and starting to frack?
Okay. Well, it's the chronology of it's a little off in the beginning, and I do that so Eris's character can start off, because she comes in late. She's the activist that comes in from out of town, and I think she's such a dynamic figure that I wanted her to start the novel off.
She is.
So it really starts with Lionel Boone discovering that a surveying crew has arrived in his town, and immediately he has bad vibes about this, because he was involved in a mining.
He was a miner.
Yeah, he's an ex-coal miner who is the sole survivor of a kettle bottom collapse, and he has some survivor's guilt over that. So I think that's what sort of triggers his reaction, that he has to do something. So once he realizes his survey crew is in town, and he understands a little bit more about what's going on, he goes immediately to the local police. Doesn't get much help there, goes to the mayor, goes to the sheriff, and then I think they even have a town hall meeting, which is not in the novel, but as a result of just not getting anywhere, he contacts some activists. He gets the names of some activists, and that's how Eris gets involved. And as all this is happening, Cass is waitressing at a diner called the Rust Bucket Inn.
I love the name.
Thank you, thanks. That's where Boone goes all the time, and it's a very small town, so there's really just one or two restaurants. So she's there in the background, just observing, and making comments, taking taking mental notes. And then by the time the novel ends, she sort of gets a little bit more involved in the activism. So it's kind of like her birth and baptism into activism, watching from afar. And Eris is already there. She's already full force, getting ready to try and stop the company who's called Ecological Resources. So,
Yeah, I love the irony of that.
yeah. I got that from. Was it Freedom Energy?
Yes.
I think when they poisoned, well, I shouldn't say they poisoned, one of their tanks leaked into the Ohio River, and I was like, Freedom Energy, that's...
Yeah, right, exactly. So why did you choose Kentucky to set it in?
I was just trying to figure out a place that was, had experienced strip mining and/or mountaintop removal. And also that could be, a target for fracking. So they had to have coal reserves and gas reserves. And in my research, I found out about the Marcellus Shale Basin, which is, part of it is in West Virginia, but the northern part, I believe, it's mostly Pennsylvania.
But there's plenty of fracking going on in West Virginia up there.
There is.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, okay, so everyone knows about the Marcellus Shale Basin. And as a writer, I knew that I'm limited in how much research I could do. So I'm not so sure I can really, I have the time and the money to travel, to go there and figure out what's going on. So I noticed that in western Kentucky, where Kentucky, Illinois, and Indiana all sort of meet in a tri-state area by the Ohio River, there's the New Albany Shale Basin, which I believe was not really targeted. So as fiction writers, we have two choices. We either have to jump in head first and get all our data correct if it's going to be, a fictional place, I'm sorry, a real place and not fictional.
Or we make it up.
Yeah, or we take the easy route, which is what I did, and just started to fictionalize some things, because it gave me more freedom to just do some things, and I felt that made the novel more organic overall.
Right. Well, in that way, as a lot of people realize, when you do that, the reader can kind of put it in a place that they know.
Yeah.
So you don't feel constrained to know something about the specific town that's real.
Yeah.
I think that's a good choice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It makes it more universal.
Right.
And so it can hit home a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah.
You told me the other day that you used all the counties in Kentucky in some way. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
How many and how'd you do that?
120 counties.
Wow.
I knew from writing my first novel that I'm going to need a boatload of names, because I'm fictionalizing everything, or mostly everything. So I'm going to need county names, I'm going to need character names, I'm going to need street names, I'm going to need company names. So I just said, I really just on a whim Googled, the counties of Kentucky, and I saw them come up, and I looked at them, and I said, well, which one of these can work as character names? And obviously Boone County,
Yeah.
Lionel Boone. Cass, Still Taylor. I think there's an Still and a Taylor County in Kentucky. Eris, not the first name, but there's a Carroll County. And the town is West York, but it's really Uniontown, and also a bit of Henderson as well, sort of mixed in. So I just thought it would work
So
out
you just
well.
checked them off as you used them?
Oh yeah, and I did. I can't tell you how many times I did this. I did a search. I did a 120 searches for every single name to make sure it was in the final document.
Yeah, I was going to say, you could have mixed them up or lost one along the way.
I did. I doubled a couple. I realized that, and I had to change that.
Yeah.
And then I had a former student of mine, a friend and a colleague. He drew a really beautiful map for me because I asked him to do that. And then I had to make changes to the names,
Yeah.
and now the map is not really
Accurate, right,
yeah.
right, that's great. Do those characters represent for you any, like archetypal, the environmentalist, the disenfranchised miner, those kinds of things, or did you think about that when you were trying to create those characters?
I think they became that, but I don't think that was
The original idea?
yeah.
Yeah.
I strive for just creating a personality and a consciousness, and the more realistic that comes across, and the more relatable the character happens to be. Each character is governed by their past, or they're dictated or influenced by their past. So Boone grew up in a privileged situation. I mean, privileged in his hometown.
Yeah.
So he learned a little bit about that because he goes to UK and to get a degree, but he winds up being a coal miner anyway. So he's there. He believes in the coal mine. He believes in everything in that system. And then once the coal mine collapses, the mineral rights are sold to an out-of-state company who comes in and does the mountaintop removal. And that's when he first realizes all the damage that's being done. So he has an awakening. So he starts off in one place and then evolves into another place.
Right.
And Eris she also has a significant moment in her life. She's going for her PhD, and she's becoming frustrated because she's realizing the limitations of history and how history is questionable. And if history is written by the winners,
Then the loser's story don't get told.
Yeah, and not only that, the winners are all white men. So, and she's a very active feminist,
Right.
as you can tell from the opening chapter.
Yes.
And I really, really enjoyed creating Cass's character because I feel that, again, I think I did this in a reading where her life is predetermined for her before she's even born. So she feels as if she is being cast in a mold, and I think she's trying to break out of that mold.
Do you think the book is optimistic?
It has its moments of optimism.
I mean, the title belies that,
Yes, yes. But I think it brings forth the truth, at least by the time you finish. It brings forth the truth of what it takes to find an energy company. They have so many reserves. They have lawyers. They have on retainer, dozens upon dozens. They influence politicians. They get legislation made in their favor.
They find loopholes and build them into the laws.
Yeah, like the Halliburton loophole. But then, and I've also heard this too. It's a $1 billion a day industry if you take all the energy companies, and it's crazy
That's mind-boggling.
that much money can be generated. But there's optimism, I think, in character growth, in the individual stories. Boone becomes a better person at the end. Eris realizes that she has a few things she's got to take care of before she goes on to her next challenge. And I think Cass has an awakening.
Yeah. Right. I love the part where the first thing that the energy company is doing is building a YMCA. You know, it's like, don't watch over here, but look at what we're doing that's wonderful. Again, that's kind of like all the lies begin with the truth. You know, we're just going to do something really good for you, but, you know, back here we're sneaking it past you.
Yeah. And I got that idea from actually a good example when I heard the Toyota plant built a YMCA. I don't know if it was the one in Buffalo, but somewhere they were doing something for the local community, and they wanted to promote wellness, which apparently they're a company that does that.
Yes.
I have a bad lower back, and I often get massages. One of my former massage therapists left West Virginia to work at the Toyota plant just outside of Lexington with her sisters because they provide massages for their employees.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing, right. You've written a lot of short stories and gotten great acclaim for them, including the Pushcart nomination. How was it for you to switch from that format to a novel?
It wasn't easy at first. You
said it kind of forced itself on you.
Yeah. I had watched this movie called Memento, which it's one of Christopher Nolan's first films, and it's split up. The timeline is split up, and it's really difficult to explain the timeline. But I had this one story that I really liked, and I thought it could be a novel. I just couldn't conceive it as a novel. And then I had just taught Memento in a class, and I was driving into work. This was in Lexington, and all of a sudden the idea just hit me. I can have two different timelines. I can have one in the past and one approximately 20 years later. So once I started doing that, I did a general outline. And I always do a general outline, if anything, even if I do an outline, just because I don't want to force, what I'm going to be writing.
Right.
So I did that, and just to see what would happen, and it started to work. And the funny thing is with All Lies Begin with Truth, I followed a similar pattern since I'd only written one other novel, and that's how I had written it. And then I broke free of that. So I think in the process of writing my second novel, I learned how to write a novel, just by not having that sort of, how would you say it, like safety net. So
you learned what not to do for you.
Yes.
What is the name of the first novel, and did it get published?
It sort of got published. It's a long story. It was originally called What We Did, because it was in first person. Then I switched it to third person, so then it was What They Did. And there's this little trick that I do when my manuscripts get rejected, and there's no other places to submit them, I change the title. And I thought I said I think I need a more catchy title. And it's called The Art of Death.
Oh.
Yeah, it's about this. He's a correctional officer at Rikers Island, and he's just in a really bad way. If a lot of correctional officers have mental health issues, at least at Rikers Island, he unearths a snuff film, or he goes to he's got a lot of problems, so he goes and he rents pornography at when you can rent video cassettes, and on one of these compilation videos he comes across a black and white film that is supposedly a snuff film that he was involved in 20 years ago, and he had sort of just tried to bury that. So it sparks in him the idea of finding out the truth, if that's legitimately a snuff film or not.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what's next?
Next is I've already written my third novel and had it proofread and corrected it and made the changes. I decided to try and do a young adult post-apocalyptic. I've always loved post-apocalyptic films, and I like to study genre. So I've read I haven't thoroughly studied young adults, so it's probably not a true young adult, but it's loosely young adult. And it's called The Law of Devil's Land. And it takes place, and we don't know this for sure, I think, in the novel, but it takes place in like the ruins of Portugal. And I could go on and on and on about why I chose Portugal, but I still can't really pin down exactly why. And it's sort of, it does borrow from the Hunger Games, but I do have to make one statement, is like, I had this idea when I was a teenager.
Okay.
So, and in order to achieve a certain level of status, much like in the Hunger Games, there's a societal structure. And so it really does mimic like a lot of our society right now. Like there's the rich, and then there's the middle class, and then there's the people that don't have anything. So the main character is from the bottom tier,
Right.
and he's considered to be an outcast because his father dies, and then his mother gets involved with a civil servant, which is fine, but then an overlord wants her, and as a result, she gets thrown in jail because she refuses him. And then the main character is orphaned, so to speak. He's on his own, and luckily he meets up with a couple of people that look out for him. And there's these annual events, they're called the Imperial events, which are kind of like X Games and like some of those crazy TV shows where people are jumping on water wheels and stuff like that. So the further along you get, the more brutal it gets, and the more it's designed to break you down.
I see.
Because it's amusement. It's kind of like the Hunger Games. It's amusement for the people in charge, the
rich.
aristocracy.
Yeah. Right.
So he has to go through the entire ordeal, and he just luckily just like bounces into the next round, and just luckily gets into the next round, and he just makes it into every single round.
Wow.
And has to
Prove himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is fascinating, and we could talk forever. I've got a million other questions I could ask you, but we're about to be out of town. Quickly tell us how to get your books.
Well, the first one, it was released only as an ebook at first, but at the time, the publisher was going out of business, so I revised it, changed it around a little bit. It's available through Amazon, only through Amazon.
Okay.
So it's All Lies Begin with Truth is also on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but it was published through Black Rose Writing. My website is just my name, Anthony-Viola, VIOLA.com. If you click on there, you can find out information and go directly to a link to buy any of these novels.
Okay,
So,
that's great. Thank you so much for being with us, and I look forward to talking to you the next time a book comes
well,
out.
thank you, Cart. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Connect with Chapters through email. Write to lp4@zoominternet.net. Chapters has a Facebook page at Armstrong Chapters. Like, subscribe, share, and comment. All Chapters episodes are available on YouTube. Visit the Armstrong Neighborhood channel on YouTube and look for a playlist of all the Chapters programs.